I am tired of the pessimism regarding the lore of this game. It seems everybody liked the gameplay and the atmosphere, the new mechanics and everything like that, but the story, the lore, are we so beholden to what we already know that we can no longer conceive what may be? There was not only instances where this game seemed to disregard the lore, but in some cases even seemed to contradict it. But if they're doing that, why do they keep telling us where the game takes place? See, I think this goes a little deeper. I think that we can piece together, not only does this game absolutely have to do with the Zelda timeline at large, this game is giving us the story of everything before the era of Hylia. Hello champions, my name is Guy, welcome back to my channel. Today, what I want to present to you is not so much a theory, but a story, a speculation. To start us off, what is the one iconic Zelda symbol that always is important? The Triforce. What is seemingly absent in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom? The Triforce. But notice how I said seemingly. The Triforce is an important piece of the puzzle. While maybe not obvious, I assure you that it is. We begin with the creation of the world. 3 golden goddesses descend from the heavens. Din, flaming arms, dirt everywhere. Nehru flies overhead and gives law to everything. The sky turns blue because of her. Furore, however you want to say it, brings forth all life forms that will inherit this world. Among these life forms are the humans, the Gorons, the Zora, and the Rito. Yes, that's right, the Rito and the Zora existed simultaneously. We know that in Wind Waker, the Rito evolved from the Zora. But what if it's not as simple as that? Here's my proposition to you. Rito is not the name of a species. Rito is a Hylian word that means bird person. We already know that there are multiple species that share the name Zora. There's lots of explanations. It could be these are freshwater Zora, these are saltwater Zora, but these ones exist in rivers too, so kind of doesn't make sense. However, they are both called Zora. So if Zora can be a shared name between fish people, cannot Rito be a shared name between peoples of the air? The golden goddesses then, as they departed for the heavens, left behind the golden relic we all know, we all love, the Triforce. The Triforce has the ability to grant the wish of any mortal who touches it. Now, obviously, mortals can be both good and evil, so who better to protect it than one who cannot use it? The gods leave Goddess Hylia in charge of the protection of the Triforce. But at this point, the kingdom of Hyrule does not exist yet. Hylia does not rule a kingdom. Her job? Protect the Triforce. The various species of the world create all their little tribes across the land. We have the tribes of the Gerudo Desert. Yes, the desert, not the grassland. We'll get there. We have the various groups of humans. We have the Gorons of the mountain, the Zora of the lakes and rivers. We already know from a couple of different sources that before Demise even made his gunning for the Triforce, there were other groups that tried to get it as well. Among them, the Interlopers. Yeah, that's right, we're getting the Interlopers in here. But what is saying that these are the only 2 times that the Triforce tried to be snatched away? This has been multiple wars, multiple invasions that go on for a long time. When the Triforce is seriously in danger, the gods themselves intervene. 1, in the adult timeline, we know the gods flooded the world because of how close Ganon was to achieving his goal of getting the Triforce. 2, with the introduction of the light spirits in Twilight Princess to drive away the interlopers. So in this time of crisis, when the Triforce is about to be snatched up by the hands of evil, what do the gods do? They send the Zonai. Now, the Zonai, we know, descended from the heavens. We know that the Zonai seemed to have been as gods, per Ganondorf's words. And we know that they brought with them special artifacts, secret stones, small motes of godly power that could be bestowed upon mortals to increase their own internal power. The Zonai were brought down as fierce protectors to assist goddess Hylia in the protection of the Triforce using secret stones. Triforce, still in the physical world, not yet been introduced to the sacred realm, now needs to be hidden. It's been too easy to access before, whether it be in the Temple of Hylia, whether it be at the exact point that the gods left it, we are unsure. But what we do know is that using the godly power of the Zonai and the secret stones, they would be powerful enough to move it. So what do? They move the Triforce and they hide it away from all mortal eyes.
And I believe they hid the Triforce underground, and I think the Zonai continue to develop this area underground, which is why we see so much Zonai tech specifically in the underground.
It's here that the Zonai bring technology to the world. Using their powers and using their knowledge of the world, they start mining up Zonite. They start creating these constructs, these robots, and they create all sorts of great technology that is made to better the world, so that power is not something that needs to be sought after anymore. Generations go by, hundreds and hundreds of years of this development, and during this era of peace, the Zonai start not to be needed anymore. The Zonai begin to die out. The Zonai begin to return to the heavens. Maybe some of the Zonai even choose to undergo draconification to stay and watch over the mortal world. We are left with just two. Minoru and her younger brother, King Rauru of Hyrule, a kingdom that he is about to establish alongside a priestess of Hylia, Queen Sonia. With the Zonai gone, and with nobody to actively watch over and protect the people of this light world, Sonia and Rauru form the Kingdom of Hyrule, an alliance between all the different peoples of the world to basically ensure that something like the wars that devastated so many before over the Triforce will never happen again. The Triforce at this point has not been seen in hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. Now, the Kingdom of Hyrule, specifically Queen Sonia and Rauru, who do know where the Triforce is, they don't want to be broadcasting that they know where the Triforce is, because that's just going to invite disaster. But it's still very important to the people of the light world. And that's why we see symbology in the Kingdom of Hyrule's design. On their clothes, they are covered in little triangles. You see it tattooed on Sonia's hand. We also see on this stained glass window in this shot within Raru's castle, boom, a stylized version of the Triforce. Squares, not triangles, but we do see this big triangle mark back here. And if you have a big triangle mark and you have 3 squares laid out particularly like this, and it's gold, you can't try to deny that that's not supposed to be a stylized version of the Triforce.
Might be a reach, but the placement of these stained glass windows might also infer that the Triforce is indeed underground, if we assume that this glass window up here that looks like a lotus flower is representative of the Zonai Kingdom. It looks a lot like the thing that holds the secret stones, and we place them physically like that, with the Kingdom of the Zonai above where the Triforce is. I don't know, that one might be a long shot, but I wanted to mention it.
Unfortunately for them, disaster's already gonna strike. A man from the desert, Ganondorf of the Gerudo, a people who did not want to accept the help of the technology of the Zonai. They still struggle. They want power. What does Ganondorf want? Not the secret stones. Ganondorf wants the Triforce. If you rewatch the memories of Tears of the Kingdom, you'll notice something. Ganondorf never refers to his goal as receiving a secret stone. No, he just mentions a great power. Through years and years of mythology and lore, people know that the Zonai were the ones that came down with their secret stones to hide away the Triforce. Ganondorf launches an attack on the newly formed Kingdom of Hyrule. And what does he see? He sees the Zonai King, King Rauru. He sees Queen Sonia, and he sees a recently arrived Zelda, all 3 of them using their secret stones to blast forth the Molduga, stopping this attack. And what does Ganondorf think? The holders of the secret stones have always been the ones protecting the Triforce.
The secret stone of the Zonai. How interesting.
Ganondorf, much like Ocarina of Time's Ganondorf, launches his master plan. He petitions the king and queen for forgiveness, and he hopes to be accepted into the embrace of Hyrule. However, King Rauru already knows that this is kind of bullshit. Yeah! You see, King Rauru holds the Light Stone. His internal power is that of light. King Rauru is the king of light.
And seemingly instinctually, he can sense the darkness within Ganondorf.
Who do we know to be the King of Darkness besides Ganondorf? Demise. Demise's goal from the beginning has always been to get his hands on the Triforce. So while Demise is still in the picture, this Ganondorf is not an incarnation of Demise's curse, an incarnation of Demise's hatred. But who's to say that this Ganondorf is not still an agent of Demise? Whether knowingly or not, Ganondorf may full well know that Demise is his master, or Ganondorf might be being played the same way Link was played in Ocarina of Time by Ganondorf. Demise is simply using Ganondorf to gain access to the Triforce. So Ganondorf gets in close with the royal family of Hyrule, and what does Ganondorf do? Immediately, he kills Queen Sonia, steals her secret stone,
and unleashes his own inner power using the secret stone. His inner power being the power Demise bestowed upon him. Hence, why he looks a whole lot like Demise while still being distinctly Ganondorf.
He begins to lament about how the Zonai had godly power under their fingertips this whole time and refused to use it. He's not referring to the secret stone. He is referring to the Triforce, because now Ganondorf knows that they have the Triforce in their possession.
You do not recognize me. Perhaps there are limits to the knowledge the secret stones impart.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever asked yourself why Ganondorf was underground when they did their final confrontation? Have you ever asked yourself, why here? Well, there's a couple interesting things. What we know right here is beneath Hyrule Castle in the modern day. In the past, Raru's castle is not where Hyrule Castle is. Raru's castle is up on the Great Plateau, just up the hill from the Temple of Time. So if Raru's castle is here, and Ganondorf was sealed over here, why was he down there?
There's nothing on the surface right above it, as we can see, so why is this chamber here?
I would argue that is where they hid the Triforce. This was the final stand they could make against Ganondorf. And why? Because he was inches away from getting his hand on the Triforce for Demise. Raru managed to seal Ganondorf away using his Zonai power, and Ganondorf was not able to reach the Triforce. Drained of all of his power that Demise had bestowed to him, Demise is now moving into the second phase of his plan. And the beginning of the second phase is wait. Demise now knows for sure that the Triforce is in the material plane. And you know who else knows? Hylia. Hylia knows that Demise now knows. So she realizes, I have no other choice. I have to step up and lead this thing. And this is where we begin the era of Hylia, the era in which Hylia ruled over the kingdom of Hyrule in order to prevent Demise from ever getting his hands on it. We know that Zelda is a bloodline descendant of Queen Sonia and King Raru. Thus, they must have had children. So if Hylia takes over this kingdom, what are their children doing? While we don't know how many children Queen Sonia and King Raru have, I would devise they had at least two. One, to carry on the bloodline of the royal family. For the sake of this argument, we'll call her Zelda. And two, the first, Sheikah. You will start to see Sheikah symbols all over the place in the past of Tears of the Kingdom, but namely two places. One, you see it hidden way up here in the royal chamber of the castle of King Raru and Sonia, and two, all over Sonia herself. Shoulders, hands, even this little jewelry thing right here is probably Sheikah. Tears under the eyes. There's clearly influence here.
We know that the Sheikah are the chosen protectors of Hylia, and we know that Sonia was a priestess of Hylia. Could it be that the Sheikah eye was originally a symbol for the priests and priestesses of Hylia and was later adopted by the Sheikah in honor of their mother, Queen Sonia? There's three little triangles. That probably represents the Triforce. Maybe it literally is the symbol of the protectors of Hylia before it became the symbol of the Sheikah.
Just look at the similarities between Queen Sonia and the first that we know of, Impa. She looks a lot more like Impa than she does like Zelda. And I don't know. I just think that is not necessarily a coincidence. Well, when Goddess Hylia takes over control of this kingdom, these two sisters devote their lives to the protection of Goddess Hylia and to the protection of her rule. We'll call the first Sheikah Impa for the sake of this video. Impa works from the shadows, behind the scenes. She works more so with the Zonai technology, while the first Zelda is more in tune with the governance and the outward nature of leading this kingdom. Goddess Hylia is leading the kingdom, but as she's doing diplomatic stuff all throughout the world, that's putting herself and the Triforce at great risk. Both of them fully committed to protecting Hylia. The other helpers of this kingdom include the sages that Rauru anointed with their own secret stones. These sages are now committed to the bettering of Hyrule and to using their powers to both protect the Triforce and to help the people of the land. One of the key peoples that needs help, the Gerudo. They were already struggling, which led to this draw for power, to this need to take control of the Triforce. They send their dignitaries, their sages, out to the Gerudo Desert, and what do? They begin a total transformation. They pour water into the great basins of the desert to form seas, to form lakes. They start to grow grass over the outside, and they use their robot helpers who are resistant to the elements to help achieve this in this harsh desert. Obviously, it's a sustained effort to keep, this verdant grassland green. So there's always robots and there's always sages out here to help make sure that it stays green. To get the Gerudo on their feet economically, they begin to mine the area for resources. These robots are great as miners because they don't have to worry about dying in the same way like a mortal would if they are, going down and digging up ore from the world. Impa's knowledge of Zonai tech starts to develop into what we know as the first Sheikah tech. Time shift stones are able to be found and created here in the Gerudo grassland, in the Lanayru grassland. Sheikah eyes appearing on all of these time shift stones. A clear connection between the Zonai constructs and the ancient robots can be seen in the fact that they have these energy beams that go through to connect their various parts and keep them floating and active. There's a connection here, and I think it stems from Impa's understanding of the Zonai tech, which is slightly less advanced than how the Zonai themselves would understand them.
Another brief piece of evidence for the Lanayru grassland actually being a desert before it became a grassland and then became a desert again is that all of the robots have the designation LD before them, which almost definitely stands for Lanayru Desert. So why would they be named LD Lanayru Desert if it was a grassland before it became a desert?
But speaking of Zonai tech, there's one key piece of Zonai tech that I forgot to mention: the Goddess Sword. The Goddess Sword, you say? Zonai tech? The Goddess Sword? Just take a look at the similarity in both color and design.
Not to mention the fact that the Master Sword has a unique interaction with the fuse ability that no other sword has. It literally absorbs the thing into the blade and then glows these little runes on the side as if it was designed to do that.
You see, back in this time, before the era of Hylia, we didn't have a Master Sword. There was no sword that sealed the darkness yet. After the death of King Rauru and Queen Sonia, what got sent back in time to Zelda? The Master Sword, still containing the essence of Fi, or Fi, if you're weird. Princess Zelda presented this sword to Minoru, a Zonai herself, who is already great with technology, and allowed Minoru to study the sword, to learn its aspects, to learn its purpose, and to begin to prepare. Using her knowledge of technology and using the now developing knowledge of Sheikah technology created by Impa,
and under Hylia's direct instruction, guidance, and involvement, specifically when it came to creating the spirit of the sword, Fi,
they create the Goddess Sword, a sword that will eventually be awakened by the three Goddess Springs, turn into the Master Sword, empowered by the sages.
Maybe Fi even had instructions because Hylia knew that the sword would need to be built in the future. Fi might have had the whole plan laid out already because Fi is the aspect of Goddess Hylia, and Goddess Hylia programmed that in her.
Special thanks to YouTube user Zelda Theorist B211ZTB is here for pointing out the similarities between the Goddess Sword and Zonai tech. Shing! We put that away for now. The kingdom of Hyrule flourishes in an era of peace. The Triforce is safe. The people are happy. But Demise, as always, secretly plots in the background. So I would imagine Demise has other agents out in the world. Girahim, for one, who is the spirit of his sword, parallel between Hylia and Demise, ones who are keen on finding the Triforce. And once Demise finally determines the location of the Triforce, now's the time to attack. With the full force of his entire army, Demise strikes. He sends forth all of the monsters from the pits of the world. He sends forth wave after wave of demons to try to destroy the forces of Hyrule so that he can get in and take the Triforce for himself. It becomes too much. Hylia knows she must make a choice. We know that the Hylians, the people closest to Hylia, were placed upon the land that would become known as Skyloft and sent above the clouds. But it's always bothered me that she would only send the Hylians. I know they're important to her. Does it not feel a little bit eugenicsy if she's only sending Hylians to be safe? No. That is not the Hylia that I know. What if the dungeons of Tears of the Kingdom are literally just the places that the other races were sent to be safe aside from Skyloft? That's where some of our lore connection comes in. The Zoras were raised up on their own island that became the great wellspring of Hyrule. This was probably raised up into the air as the Zora Protective Land. What was raised up as the Rito Protective Land either was or became the Stormwind Arc, this great airship that we know is important to the Rito people, at least by the era of Tears of the Kingdom. Whether or not they were raised upon that or they built it to continue sailing the skies after the fact is irrelevant. We have the pyramid that I don't know its name as the Gerudo's protective land, and we have the Goron City, whose name I also don't know, as the Goron's protective region.
I noticed while editing that the Stormwind Arc and the Great Wellspring of Hyrule are both already in the sky. We never do hear that the islands weren't already in the sky and Hylia just sent them higher above the cloud barrier. We know that the Zonai have these like drop things that their children did tests of courage in. It's likely that there was already floating islands, and then once Demise attacked the world, Hylia just sent all the floating islands above the cloud barrier.
Eventually the Hylians would come down, the Zoras would come down. Rito probably just stayed up there. And that's why we never see the Rito in any of the games. But you know where we do see Rito? There is a mysterious carving in Twilight Princess on the walls of Castle Town, where we see apparently these birdmen that bear a whole lot of resemblance to the Rito, huh? As far as we know, there's never been any Rito in this timeline and never will until Breath of the Wild. But if the Rito have always existed, only maybe a couple of them ever coming down because they were content to live in the sky? Well, here's where we get contact. Skyloft happened to be the one that the Hylians were raised upon. Obviously, through hundreds of years of isolation, the Hylian story would become just about the Hylians. This story that we're told is told from a Hylian perspective. It's not necessarily historical truth.
But there are other legends long hidden away from memory that are entwined with this tale. Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom have the same writers and creative team. Are they talking about the Zonai? Am I right?
You see, there's things that if we pull out our creative minds just a little bit, we could draw connections where maybe the connections aren't explicit, but they might still be there. Hylia sent the Triforce aboard Skyloft up into the sky, rallied the peoples of the surface, fought against Demise as hard as they could to keep him away as this whole process was undergoing, as the islands were raising into the sky, as the cloud barrier was forming. Hylia suffered grave injuries during this war. Almost everybody on the light world was wiped out. Hylia's plan was already set in motion. Hylia oversaw the creation of the goddess sword. Hylia oversaw the implementation of the goddess springs to put forth the power. Hylia created the songs that would eventually lead the next hero to the defeat of Demise. And Hylia sacrifices her immortal form because she knew eventually she would need to wish upon the Triforce and wanted to make sure whoever wished upon the Triforce was good. And she put her spirit safely up through the heavens and into the body of what would become her eventual mortal reincarnation, Zelda. The world lay desolate and empty. Few survivors managed to scrap together what they can. The few Magma remaining scrap together what they can. The few Gorons making their way across the world. The few Kikwi have their own little tree that they just do whatever they want in. Without active intervention, technology would break down. The magic that was keeping the Lanayru grasslands a grassland and a sea eventually would run out. And the robots, continuing the last assignment that they got, which was just to mine up resources, eventually re-destroyed the climate, and it became a desert once again. The world as we knew it was over, but all hope was not lost. And here's where we get into the Zelda timeline. We would get to Skyward Sword, where Zelda is kidnapped by Demise, who's slowly been growing his power, and Link travels through time to rescue her. Demise curses the trio to always be in this eternal battle. They reform Hyrule alongside Impa. Not Impa, Impa died, but alongside the remaining Sheikah people who have always been there to protect the goddess Hylia, and now the incarnation of the goddess Hylia.
Using the symbol of both the Triforce and the goddess Hylia / the Loftwing, a symbol that is notably absent in Rauru and Sonia's Hyrule, but appears in Hylia's Hyrule and every royal family after the fact.
The games, as we know, begin to happen. A new Ganondorf is born, hundreds of years later. He tries to take Hyrule once again to get the Triforce for himself, but he is defeated by this new incarnation of Link and Zelda. This event splits the timeline. In all three timelines, Ganondorf dies, but Demise's hatred remains. With nobody else for Demise to put his mortal form into, this is where Demise's hatred, his malice, becomes the Calamity. The Calamity wrecks Hyrule, but luckily an incarnation of the goddess is there to stop him, and an incarnation of a hero who suspiciously looks like Zonai, and I theorize maybe he was another one of Rauru and Sonia's children who was sent up in his own island on the Temple of Time, sealed away to be awoken at the right time. Regardless, he's defeated, but we knew that the Calamity was gonna come back. It was not defeated for good. And of course, 10,000 years later, come back it did, and this time it won. Demise's hatred won. It took over Hyrule Castle, and in the process, weakened the seal on this Ganondorf. You see, it is my thought that this Ganondorf did not cause the Calamity. This Ganondorf was not producing the Calamity. The Calamity was a result of the old Ganondorf's remaining malice from Demise's power. The Calamity Ganon is old Ganondorf. This Ganondorf does not use malice, he uses gloom, a similar but distinctly different power.
He's also the only Ganondorf to never have a Ganon form, if that means anything to you, if Ganon happens to be the physical manifestation of Demise's power as accentuated by the Triforce of power. He never has a Ganon. This Ganondorf doesn't have a Ganon.
As the Calamity happens, the seal on this Ganondorf is weakened. Rauru, who was down there sealing away the whole time, starts to fade away. Over the next 100 years, Raru's seal is broken until he becomes nothing but a hand. But by the time they manage to find Ganondorf beneath Hyrule Castle, he's already awake. But it was just in time for the plan to begin anew. And through the action of Zelda grabbing Raru's light stone, falling, and being sent back in time, we begin the entire cycle anew. And what is more Zelda than a time loop? What do you think? I completely understand this was not as much of a theory video as it was a speculation video, but that wasn't really my goal. You see, my goal here was to combat the pessimism that I've been seeing around Tears of the Kingdom's lore. I think if we dig a little bit deeper, there's more that we can uncover from what we were presented in the game. The Triforce does not have to be front and center for it to still play a role. Something I want you to keep in mind is that just because somebody, even in game, tells you something, doesn't necessarily mean that that is hard truth. People get things wrong all the time. The only things we can trust are the things we actually see in the game itself. Legends, myths, stories, they might be based in fact, especially in a world of gods and magic, but that doesn't make them true. I hope you liked this video. Leave a like if you did. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you want to become a champion too, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and you'll get a pizza this freaking big. And I will see you in the next one.